Our body is fragile and constrained by so many limitations. This body will be beyond repair someday, either by age or by accident. However, is this the end? In the year 2001, Dr. Van Lommel conducted a research on 344 consecutive patients of cardiac arrest in 10 Dutch hospitals. Out of these, 62 reported a conscious visual experience during their revival from unconsciousness. Such an experience, which occurs among the clinically dead, is called a near-death experience. In cases of cardiac arrest, the electroencephalogram of the brain shows no measurable brain activity. However, such patients after regaining consciousness report prolonged detailed visual experiences of the time when their brains were inactive. This is especially notable as there is a prolonged period of brain inactiveness before and after cardiac arrest. An inactive brain cannot simulate such a detailed visual experience. Dozens of studies published show hundreds of cases where near-death experiences have been reported among patients of cardiac arrest. The patients reported that they were even more clearly conscious and alert than normally during these experiences, even though their brain showed no measurable activity. In a research by Van Lommel, a patient who had remained deeply comatose and under artificial respiration for days nonetheless upon recovering, recognized the male nurse who had removed his dentures to prepare him for intubation. He asked him to return his dentures, correctly identifying their whereabouts on a sliding shelf. He also accurately described details of the resuscitation room, the procedure, and the appearance of other staff members. The fact that the denture removal occurred during the comatose period and that the staff had not mentioned the removal supports the inference that the patient's perception occurred during the coma. Next is the case of a 7-year-old girl who was in a deep coma as she had drowned. However, on recovering and regaining consciousness, she knew the details of her emergency care, such as her unusual intubation nasal instead of oral. She even knew where her parents were during her time in coma, what clothes they wore, and even the activities they did at home during her hospitalization. Weiss and Van Lommel in their research report the case of a blind woman who suffered cardiac arrest. Upon recovery, she said she was watching her own CPR. She saw as they thumped on her chest and pumped air into her lungs. A pen fell out of the doctor's pocket and rolled near the same window where she was standing and watching the entire operation. When she told the doctor that she had observed her own CPR, the doctor said, "You were hallucinating due to lack of oxygen." However, she replied, "But I saw your pen roll over to the window," she replied. Then she described the pen and other details of the CPR. The doctor was shocked. His patient had not only been comatose during the CPR, but she had also been blind for many years. In a later publication, Weiss noted that the cardiologist was still shaken days later. When he told Weiss about it, he confirmed that everything the woman related had indeed taken place, and that her descriptions were accurate. Other cases of verified perceptual recollection by near-death survivors blind since birth have also been reported in the literature. In another case, a surgery patient under anesthesia and draped above the neck described the activities of his surgeon. The patient said that the doctor was flapping his arms, as if trying to fly. The interviewer thought this couldn't be true anyways, and must be just a hallucination. However, upon discussing with the surgeon verified this description of his movements, explaining that in an effort to prevent contamination after scrubbing in, he directed staff in this way. A medical colleague of the surgeon's was exasperated. "So explain that to me. Explain that through chemicals or some other materialist scientific explanation. Please explain to me why that man knows that." An NDE survivor named Sandra, who had contracted encephalitis and had lost ordinary consciousness upon recovery, drew a sketch of a girl she met during her coma. When she told her parents what she was drawing, they became ashamed and left the room. Later they returned and told her about the sister she never knew she had, who was struck by a car and died before Sandra was born. For the soul there is never birth nor death, nor, having once been, does he ever cease to be. He is unborn, eternal, ever-existing, undying and primeval. A person seated in a high-speed motor car goes faster than one seated in a slower car, though the living entities, the drivers, may be the same. Similarly, by the order of the Supreme Soul, material nature fashions a particular type of body to a particular type of living entity to work according to his past desires.